In 2018, Netflix announced it had picked up the rights to develop a live-action adaptation of the iconic Nickelodeon animated series Avatar: The Last Airbender, a move that had a lot of people doubtful. Adapting Avatar to the big screen is something that had been tried before by M. Night Shyamalan, all the way back in 2010 to overwhelmingly negative results, as The Last Airbender is widely regarded as one of, if not the worst movie ever made. So much so that it kicked off the stigma against the term live-action anime for years to come. Well, it also didn't help that every attempt afterwards would proceed to crash and burn horribly, with adaptations like Ghost in the Shell, Death Note, and Cowboy Bebop making the same exact mistakes over and over again. Mistakes like poor hiring choices, misunderstanding the source material, not knowing how to market them, and corporations just getting plain greedy are reoccurring issues when it comes to this sort of stuff. So you can see why Avatar fans had their guard up, as they had every right to. To be honest, I didn't share that sentiment. Avatar never really resonated with me when I was a kid, like every other person my age. I grew up glued to my TV screen watching Saturday morning cartoons on the Vortex channel, with shows like Spectacular Spider-Man, Sonic X, and Teen Titans being among my favorites. I do remember Avatar being there, but I always saw it as too kiddish for some reason, never really giving it a chance outside of catching a few episodes while waiting for Power Rangers to start. That's why as I got older, I never really understood the hype surrounding Avatar, or why it had such a big cultural impact. That was until May of 2020. When Netflix added it to their service, did I finally sit down to properly watch it. I'm so glad that I did, because it almost feels like it changed me overnight. I realized Avatar wasn't just a cartoon for kids, it was for everybody. Everyone can approach Avatar and walk away, understanding the deep narrative and political themes the show has to offer, no matter what walk of life you come from. To this day, I still think it's one of the best TV shows ever made, and I don't think that's ever going to change, as whenever I rewatch it, my appreciation for the series only grows and grows. That's a testament to just how well Avatar has aged, that someone like me was able to just jump in after its finale almost 2 decades ago, and still have the same amount, if not more enjoyment compared to someone that watched it when it was airing. I also think that's why I was a bit more open to the idea of Netflix giving a fresh take that could further elevate the source material and discoverability of the series. I mean, everything was looking positive for the live action. The original creators, Michael Dante DiMartino and Brian Kontesco, were on the project as executive producers. Not to mention last year's One Piece live action, which absolutely blew everyone's expectations out of the water, proving that Netflix might just know what they are doing, right? I'm sure you all know where this is going. But before I get there, I just want to clarify that this video is not a review of the Avatar live action. If you want my critical opinion of the series, I think it's just okay, nothing special. If you want to see a video of someone trashing or praising the series, go somewhere else, because that is not what this video is going to be. Instead today, I want to talk about why Netflix's live action Avatar is a problem. To me, it represents everything wrong with modern day Hollywood and Western corporations' view on media as a whole, but specifically anime. As I guarantee you, this series is signaling in a new wave of awful live action adaptations like we haven't seen before. And it all starts with the changes made. Since the birth of animation, it has always been looked down upon by general audiences as being an inferior art form when compared to live action. This stigma comes from the fact that most animated media is geared primarily towards children, though the sentiment is only predominant in the West. Overseas, animation is much more valued thanks to Japan's output of anime. Michael Dante DiMartino and Brian Kontesco have stated that anime is what inspired them to make Avatar so unabashedly mature. But the man behind the wheel of the live-action Avatar, Albert Kim, does not seem to agree. There is this false idea that what defines a piece of media's maturity is how much gore or violence it contains, when in reality, maturity is shown in the themes it represents, or more specifically, how it handles them. War, militarism, imperialization, genocide, loss, religion, and learning how to be a better person are just a few of the themes that make Avatar mature. But when Albert Kim is asked to name something that he thinks is mature in the original Avatar, his answer during an interview with IGN was, I think Code the Face Stealer initiated nightmares in an entire generation of kids. That's not something you normally see on a Nickelodeon show. See what I mean? Kim's definition of mature storytelling is when something gives him a little spook, not any of the themes we talked about above. This is what leads me to believe that Kim deeply misunderstood Avatar, as he also states, we had to make it a serialized Netflix drama, which meant it couldn't just be for kids, and so it had to feel grounded and mature and adult in that way too. He seems to think that Avatar was just some cartoon with no real depth or meaning, past profiting off of little kids. It wasn't until he came along and made it a serialized Netflix drama did Avatar have any real value, according to him. This explains a lot of the changes made to certain characters in the live action, since Kim seems to have chalked them up to being too one-dimensional and not deep enough. The funny thing is that in his attempt to, and I quote, update them a little bit, Kim unknowingly does the exact opposite and dumbs these characters down. Look no further for a victim of this updating than Sokka. At the start of Avatar, Sokka was, well, no beating around the bush, a sexist jerk. This comes from the fact that during the war, he was forced into the role of warrior from birth, and taught that in order to survive, he has to stay in that role his entire life. He pushes this ideal onto other people as well, especially women who, in his village, served on the home front as healers and gatherers. That's why when he meets Suki in Kyoshi village, a woman who is a warrior and much better than him, Sokka freaks out and treats her horribly. Though, over time, Sokka begins to question his own ideals and he goes to Suki, hoping to learn from her. This builds up to their final moments in episode 4, when he apologizes to Suki.
I treated you like a girl when I should have treated you like a warrior.
I am a warrior. But I'm a girl, too.
This moment completely breaks down the idea of hierarchy in his head. He no longer thinks that everyone should be forced to stick to one role, that anyone can be anything they want, whether that be a woman and a warrior. Suki also recognizes something in Sokka. She sees him actively trying to change and be a better person for her, which is what causes the two to fall in love in one of the best written dynamics in all of Avatar. So how does the live action go about kindling their relationship? She walks in on him with his shirt off. In an interview with Katara's actor in the live action, she stated, "I feel like we also took out some of the elements of how sexist Sokka was. I feel like there are a lot of moments in the original show that were iffy. Why are they acting like Avatar is some ultra problematic thing from the 60s? It was made 15 years ago. Did the creators only watch the first half of every episode? How did they not see Sokka moving past his views throughout the course of the series to be a better person? Look, changes aren't bad when it comes to adaptations. They are expected, but you cannot take away essential core elements of these characters and then act like you are not only improving upon them, but fixing problematic elements that were not there in the first place. This is just insanely disrespectful to the original show and the people who worked on it." If it wasn't already clear that the live-action Avatar creators didn't understand any of what they were given, the worst offender in my opinion was Katara. Albert Kim made a comment referring to Katara in the same IGN interview from earlier, stating, "The cartoon, for as great as it was 15 years ago. And so, things have changed. There are certain roles I think that Katara did in the cartoon that we didn't necessarily also do here. I mean, I don't really want to get into a lot of that, but some gender issues that didn't quite translate." When I first heard this quote, I thought, oh great. They're getting rid of Katara overcoming the outdated traditions of the Northern Water Tribe, aren't they? Since that would be the simplest answer. Man, I wish that were the case, because what they changed instead is so much worse. While it's sort of present in Avatar Season 1, in Season 2, Katara's character shifts to being the realist of the gang, often having to be the mature one in every situation to keep the group on track. This is due to Katara developing into a much more motherly figure throughout the show. Sometimes to her own chagrin, as this often creates tension between her and the gang whenever she has to be the bad guy. Unfortunately, this has spawned a lot of undeserved hate directed at Katara by certain fans of the show. People often complain she's a complete buzzkill and, for lack of a better word, a bitch when it comes to the gang trying to have fun. Of course, this complaint is always stated by people who just completely misunderstand her character development, which always surprises me, because this is one of the few things Avatar is not subtle about.
She's always got to be right about everything, and she gets all bossy and involved and in your business. But honestly, I'm not sure I can remember what my mother looked like. It really seems like my whole life, Katara's been the one looking out for me. And now, when I try to remember my mom, Katara's is the only face I can picture.
I bring this up because I think that the creators of the live action are in that camp of misunderstanding Katara as a character and think she's nothing more than a buzzkill. So in order to justify their poor media literacy, they seem to have done mental gymnastics, landing on the conclusion that Katara is nothing more than a product of outdated sexism. While to be fair, I don't know this for sure. What else could Kim Albert have been referring to when he mentioned gender issues prevalent in the original show related to Katara? When I was watching the live-action Avatar, Katara seemed very off throughout the entire season, but I couldn't quite put my finger on why. It wasn't until I remembered Albert Kim's comments did I finally realize that, outside of a few key moments, Katara no longer speaks up to voice her opinion like she did in the original series, just going along with every dumb decision the gang makes in the live action. Katara is no longer a well-written and complex character, now just a soulless robot being piloted around for the convenience of the plot. It almost seems that in an attempt to pull Katara out of a misogynist archetype that didn't exist in the first place, the creators have unknowingly plunged her headfirst into an actual misogynist archetype, that being the happy-go-lucky love interest whose only purpose in the story is to remind us she exists from time to time. Man, the live-action Avatar writers should hop on that Hollywood Naruto movie, because they write their female characters just about as well as that series does. One of the other major changes that the live-action Avatar makes is the very early introduction of Fire Lord Ozai and Azula. While I still have problems with Ozai in the show, they pale in comparison to the catastrophe that is live-action Azula. According to Albert Kim, Azula's story in the first season is a bit of a prequel to her story in the second and third seasons, but that's another element we thought we should see rather than just talk about. I will admit, expanding on Azula actually sounds like a good idea, but in order to execute that idea properly, you have to understand her as a character. Another common misconception in the Avatar community comes from people mistaking Azula to be a one-dimensional villain who's only evil for evil's sake. To be fair, they aren't far from wrong, as she is an awful human being who will manipulate anyone to get exactly what she wants. She's so good at manipulating that people often pass her off as simple-minded, both in the show and in real life. My favorite example of her complexity in the original show is this scene in episode 1 of season 3. Right after Zuko just found out that Azula told their father that he killed Aang, when in reality she was the one who did. This is something extremely unlike Azula, so Zuko confronts her about it.
Please, Zuko. What ulterior motive could I have? What could I possibly gain by letting you get all the glory for defeating the Avatar? Unless, somehow, the Avatar was actually alive. All that glory would suddenly turn to shame and foolishness.
The voice actress for Azula, Grey Delisle, has allegedly stated in interviews that she was asked to play the scene as if she was almost trying to seduce Zuko, and it wasn't until I watched the live action did I finally realize what she meant by this. Azula knows how hard Zuko fought to regain his honor, and that he would do anything to keep it. That's his flaw, a flaw that she can take advantage of. So she throws everything she has at Zuko to mess with his brain and make him paranoid, driving him so crazy he can't figure out what Azula's true motives are, making him perfect to manipulate for her own gain. In the live action, this mastermind nature is completely absent. This show likes to pretend that being raised by Ozai is what entirely led Azula to being a sociopath. While that is partially true, it is mainly because Azula was just born like that. Take this scene from episode 7 of season 2, when she was little and found out about her cousin's death in the war.
It means Uncle's a quitter and a loser. He found out his son died and he just fell apart. A real general would stay and burn Ba Sing Se to the ground, not lose the battle and come home crying.
Albert Kim claims that introducing Azula early allows the audience to, and I quote, know more about the background for Zuko and why he's doing what he's doing. Again, on paper this would have been a good idea if they understood Azula as a character. They would know she works as a foil to Zuko. So if you make Azula a carbon copy of him, that being a misunderstood villain fighting for their honor, then Zuko can't ever grow to realize that he is different from his sister, and not an inherently evil person. If the live-action creators continue down this path of trying to expand on Azula, then you are going to make the best character arc in the series, Zuko's, feel weak and unrealistic when compared to the original Avatar. I mean, I guess they could go the route of having Iroh being the only positive role in Zuko's change, as he is one of the only characters that the live-action creators seem to have understood, painfully so. In the original Avatar, almost right off the bat, you could tell something was different about Iroh. He doesn't agree with the war the Fire Nation started, and in fact, wants to end it more than anything. But Iroh was so well written in the original that this never had to be said outright. Instead, his characterization was conveyed through lots of subtle moments that keep building up upon each other until the last episode. But the live-action Avatar doesn't trust its audience to come to their own conclusions. That's why in Iroh's introduction, the show literally tells you everything you need to know about him like it's a Wikipedia article. This is not the only time the live-action treats its viewers like they're stupid. since the creators do not seem to understand the idea of subtlety. If I were to ask any Avatar fan what their favorite moment from the original series was, almost everyone would say Iroh's song from Season 2. I know because I am one of those people. I mean, what's not to love about this moment? In just 4 minutes, Iroh helps a mother stop her little boy from crying, a group of teenagers out of trouble, and an adult trying to find his way in life. The scene ends with Iroh going up to a single tree, sitting atop a hill, where it's revealed that that day would have been his late son's birthday had he not perished in the war. So Iroh sings a beautiful song in his memory. A song about how he wishes he could have helped his son throughout the stages of his life, just like he did for other people, just like he's doing now for Zuko. Throughout the entire series, we never get a flashback of Iroh in his prime. We never see him with his son, we never see him grieving because of his loss, and we never see him transforming into a better person. Yet we still know all that happened, since Iroh is such a well-written character. Subtlety is what gives this scene the mountain-sized impact that it has, never failing to leave anyone a sobbing mess. But if you remove that subtlety and treat your audience like idiots, then you remove everything that made this scene so special to so many people. If the creators of the live-action Avatar can't understand the core storytelling of the original series and just chalk it up to being a kid's show, then why adapt it at all? Why try to make Avatar something it isn't, with the needless desire to expand on what wasn't there in the first place? Well, I think that Albert Kim answers our question in that same IGN interview. The live-action Avatar had to also appeal to people who are big fans of Game of Thrones. Back in the mid-2010s, Game of Thrones was the biggest TV show, well, period. Everyone was tuning in, and I don't just mean fantasy nerds or TV heads, I mean everyone and their mother was glued to their screen whenever Game of Thrones came on. For good reason, since the first 4 seasons are some of the best television in human history. Though nowadays when you bring up Game of Thrones, all people talk about is that god-awful final season. So what I think Kim means by appealing to Game of Thrones fans is that Netflix wanted the live-action Avatar to capture the same audience that Game of Thrones did, that audience being everyone. An absurd demand, but a demand nonetheless. So Kim, a person who thinks Avatar is only a kid's show, feels the need to start expanding in order to reduce risk and maximize profit. I think it's kind of ironic that Kim mentions Game of Thrones, because what made the first 4 seasons of that show so great was how faithfully it adapted the books it was based off of, even working closely with the author, George R.R. Martin, to make sure the show carried over what made the source material special. It's not until Game of Thrones ran out of books to adapt did everything start to crash and burn. It seems that Kim and Netflix don't realize this. As they strayed so far from what made Avatar special in the first place, they pushed away the original series creators. In the beginning of this video, I said that Michael Dante DiMartino and Brian Konietzko were working on the live action as executive producers. Well, that's not entirely true, as in late 2020, DiMartino released an update on his personal blog stating, "Many of you have been asking me for updates about the Avatar live action Netflix series. I can finally tell you that I am no longer involved with the project." In June of this year, after 2 years of development work, Brian Konietzko and I made the difficult decision to leave the production. What I can be certain about is that whatever version of the live action ends up on screen, it will not be what Brian and I had envisioned or intended to make. I think it's pretty clear Netflix only brought the original creators on board for the live action so fans wouldn't worry as much, with no intention to give them any creative control over the project. Netflix has zero respect for the original Avatar series, only picking it up to make a quick buck. But in an attempt to try and make the live action an item they can market to everybody, they sucked all of the creative charm out of the series, making it for nobody. I think that this will become a reoccurring issue in the next few decades, as this is probably the first of many new awful anime live action adaptations. Why do I think this? Well, because the current state of the entertainment industry is an absolute mess right now. Since 2020, the AAA video game industry has become unsustainable, as games are not only more expensive to make, but taking literally decades to get out the door. All of Hollywood's big movies and TV shows with budgets in the hundreds of millions are tanking at the box office. For almost 2 decades, there was stability in comic book content, as the MCU dominated pop culture. But now that doesn't even work anymore, since every company under the sun tried to capitalize on this superhero buzz. This ended up oversaturating the market, and inventing the term superhero fatigue. so the industry is desperately trying to find something else to latch onto. Something that already comes with a massive pre-existing fan base that can be built upon. And there is no better option right now than anime. I mean, think about it. When everyone was locked inside because of the pandemic, anime found millions of new fans almost immediately. So much so that the 2020 Demon Slayer movie ended up beating out Christopher Nolan and Sonic the Hedgehog to become the highest grossing film of the year. I guarantee you, whatever number of Hollywood anime adaptations were in production before this year have now increased tenfold after the monumental success of the One Piece live action. This isn't inherently a bad thing, as it's kind of cool to see all of these companies finally take notice of anime. But unfortunately, I don't think that the majority of these projects coming out of Hollywood will be made with the same love and care as the One Piece live action. Instead, I think these companies will once again oversaturate the market, but not with superhero content this time, but with poorly made live action anime media. The MCU wasn't just successful overnight. It took a long time for it to become the infinite money glitch it was at its apex. But nowadays, companies can no longer afford to focus on long-term profit. They only want to try and replace the MCU as quickly as they can with no idea how to actually do that. Though who knows, I could be wrong. Maybe the One Piece live action is the Iron Man equivalent of Hollywood anime projects. But I think we're about a decade too early to tell. What I can say for sure is that the boundless mediocrity born from the misunderstanding of the source material and desire for short-term profit, like the live action Avatar, is going to be the norm for a long time. Thank you all for watching. I'll see you guys next time. Have a good one.